In respect and honor of all those who are gracing the occasion, I say that Ana Tera Mubarak तशरीफ लाने वाले खुशियां मना रहे हैं तुम सबको बुलाने वाले. See, Mother Earth needs prayers, needs the involvement of each and every citizen, that 8 billion people who are living here. It needs a care of them because it cares for them. So, friends, our topic today is to bring the people who have the key of finance in their hands to be aware of their responsibility of bringing in carbon neutrality and trying their best to make this world net zero. Now, there are two options before bankers. They can either stop lending, but that will be self-defeating because banks have also to subsist. They provide a lot of employment. They add to the nation's GDP, productivity. They enable international trade. So as such, banks cannot be immediately net zero. So the message to them is to become carbon neutral. Now, what is carbon neutral? You all know that neutralizing carbon dioxide emission from the operations and removing them from the atmosphere is actually neutralization of carbon. But we can achieve it by investing in carbon offset projects. Suppose you get a good proposal from Indian Oil Corporation for say 500 crores, which is one of the safest lending, then you will be naturally tempted to lend to Indian Oil Corporation. But then you all know that they are the biggest creators of carbon. They are probably, in a position where they cannot help themselves because their product is such. So if you finance Indian Oil Corporation, then your effort should be that you should also try to finance a solar big unit of similar size, or a unit, making electricity from air, windmills, or from bagasse, so that you become carbon neutral. Because you cannot stop funding Indian corporation, which is, generating fossil fuels and various carbons, and you have to finance uh, such units which are polluting, because you are part of the MSME development in India, which is undergoing a lot of transformation. So as such, you must set off by financing alternate resources of energy which reduce the carbon content. If your branch is financing 5 diesel cars every day, please ensure that 2 or 3 EVs, electric cars, are also financed there. Thereby, you will be offsetting and you will be creating what is called as carbon neutrality. Now, this can also be achieved by buying carbon credits. You know what is carbon credit? Carbon credit is, the saving of various carbon generated by the system through saving in water, through saving in energy, through saving in various other inputs. If you generate such savings through your processes, then you generate what is called as carbon credits, which are traded internationally. Now, you have seen the Tesla car. Tesla car balance sheet of this year shows that they have got $1.79 billion as carbon credit benefits in their balance sheet. Their operational profits are $750 million, but receipt from carbon credits is $1.79 billion because they have innovated a car which is, saving so much of carbon from the atmosphere. So now what oil companies in America are doing is that they are buying the carbon credits from Tesla and paying him money. So this way also carbon neutrality can be created. Then coming to net zero. Net zero is a very difficult task for any bank to exercise. As such, we have kept it on second. But Bankers Club is a bridge between banks and corporates. Now, corporates can be guided to become net zero by, changing their production processes, attending to scope 1, 2, and 3. You all know what is scope 1, 2, and 3. See, scope 1 is the process which you adopt, which generates carbon directly. like your factory, like your car, your travel in aeroplane, they all, generate scope 1 energies, which, harm the atmosphere. That is a very small part of the carbon which is generated. Then there are scope 2, like you are using an electricity which is generated by a thermal power plant, and that thermal power plant is burning coal and creating a lot of carbon. So you are also indirectly responsible for consuming such energy and soiling the atmosphere. But what we are concerned is about the scope 3, that is the funds we finance to various companies who generate carbon and soil the entire atmosphere and threaten the existence of life on this earth. We must see that these finance emissions, they are controlled. Try to encourage a budget in your branches wherein you discourage funding of diesel generators, or diesel cars, or such factories which are not worried about harvesting their waste, or do not process the water, the contaminated water which they generate in the process. So friends, the climate risk which is confronting today is like the terrorist risk. It suddenly happens. We all saw how corona came and removed a large number of industries from the world itself. So what we expect is that, kindly come back to back screen, Nita. What we expect is the previous screen. What we expect is that please indoctrinate the climate risk into the DNA of bankers. They must know that the physical risk which can confront the loan they have provided or they have nurtured very badly, and suddenly their entire asset can vanish. And in the process, there is a cost. They may lose the asset. And then there is another, risk which is confronting the corporate assets is the transition risk. If you have to inculcate discipline of observing carbon neutrality or carbon zero status, then you have to invest in technology, you have to formulate policies, you have to give away certain bad debts which were otherwise giving you good income. So that those types of risks are transition risks. So bankers must inculcate in their DNA that they have to mitigate climate risk. Only then they will be able to really manage the credit risk, the market risk, the liquidity risk, and the operational risks. Unless you manage the transition and physical climate risks, you will not be able to protect your assets for long term. They will be vulnerable to any change in atmosphere, whether it's a flood, whether it's an earthquake, whether it is a pandemic. All those things will impact the asset value. That is why we are here to advise bankers that when they do the credit assessment, in their credit rationale, the rating rationale, they must give a big weightage to the carbon emission weaknesses of the asset. Next, please. See, the problem is actually taking attention of all our controllers, Government of India, SEBI, and various authorities. In fact, as per the guidelines of SEBI, 1,000 top corporates in India per market capitalization have to essentially, report every month to SEBI about the steps they have taken to neutralize carbon. And if you see how the awareness is now, yarning and developing across the financial arena in India, right from 2019, RBI published, climate-related financial risk guidelines, and in 21, it set up a task force on sustainable finance through Economic Affairs Department. Then SEBI issued BRSR requirements. As I submitted, 1,000 top corporates in India, they have to, every month submit a report, which is called as Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. And if you do not furnish this report, there are going to be restrictions on your accessing the market funds. So which will again affect your development. Now, RBI has, created a network for greening of financial system. Most of the banks are now issuing green bonds, accepting green deposits, and all those funds are completely monitored by Reserve Bank of India through BRSR, that those funds are invested in projects which are green projects, which are not a threat to environment. In 2023, RBI published framework for acceptance of green deposits, and most of the banks have now started accepting these deposits. And now in this year, RBI has released draft disclosure framework on climate-related financial risks. The framework mandates disclosures on four key areas. That is the governance. Governance means the ESG is not only for soiling the atmosphere, it is also for taking care of the society. So there are social responsibility. Should not be any child labor or any exploited working hour for the labor. And then there is management of risks, not only the ordinary risk of credit, market, liquidity, and all that, the risk which comes through the climate, that is also to be done. And then this draft disclosure is asking for various strategies which bank has adopted to mitigate such problems, and it has set up the metrics and targets within which each bank has to operate. Friends, Indian banks have responded very, very positively, and they have gradually started to take measures on the path to carbon neutrality and net zero. If you see some of the even leading foreign banks like DBS Bank has already partnered with a carbon finance company to measure carbon emissions from a particular portfolio using a special tool called as carbon neutral event calculator. Now, this is an epoch-making step taken by a bank in India, which in long term will definitely reduce the carbon emissions in the financed products which they have. Similarly, bank like SBI has recently floated a huge tender wherein it has asked experts to come to their various branches and measure the carbon footprint of the loan portfolio. Suppose a fertilizer plant has been financed by SBI, then SBI wants these experts to measure the carbon footprints of this asset and advise how they can neutralize or they can offset this through other type of lending. Union Bank of India has also initiated steps, and of course, banks like Axis Bank and ICICI banks have already mapped their emissions. And if you see the credit rationales of these banks, wherein they give a rating to the corporate who has approached them for financing, there they give positive and negative marks depending on the status of carbon neutrality of that particular corporate. Yes Bank has taken a big lead. It has already pledged to attain a net zero status by 2030. It is targeting GHG emissions from its scope 1 and scope 2. Friends, this greenhouse gas emissions scope 1 and 2 is actually a very small step, but then we are so happy to see that this message is reaching them, and they're starting with scope 1 and 2 because they are hardly 5% of the spoilers of the atmosphere. In your office, you have a data center, you are using lifts, or you have a cafe, you have a cooking station. All these things also generate a lot of carbon. So these carbons, or your guys, your staff comes in a diesel car or petrol car. So all these scope 1 and 2, a lot of attention is going. Yes Bank is taking lead in managing this, but ultimately they have to reach to scope 3, which is the financed emissions. Friends, HDFC Bank has also announced its plan to become carbon neutral by 2031 and 32. And all of us know that Government of India has already committed that India will become a net zero on the following, the above four principles which we just discussed by 2070. Friends, banks are the center of enabling sustainable transformation as our great India moves towards a net zero future, led by climate risk resilience and environmental responsibility of the corporate sector. Banks alone can save this earth. President Barack Obama, when he was president, said, "We are the first generation to feel the real impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it." You see how harsh are the rains, how harsh was the summer, and now winter will be equally harsh. So we are the first generation feeling this, and we are the last generation who can do something about it. Otherwise, the conditions will go out of hand. Friends, environment is no one's property to destroy. It's everyone's responsibility to protect. I Before I hand over to Mita, I will only say that let everyone sweep in front of his own door, and the whole world will become clean. That is the message today from CSO Global and Bankers Club.